There we go. All right. The Lord be with you.
And
And
also
also
with
with
you.
you.
Loving God, thank you for this day. And again, the opportunity to gather. We wish we could be in the same room, and that'll come soon. We know we'll be together very soon. So continue to give us patience as we wait, and fill us with your spirit as we engage in conversation today about your church. Guide us, use us, take from us the old baggage that maybe we've been carrying about the church for many, many years, decades. Help us to be willing to be shaped into new people with new eyes, new hearts, new ways of discovering you, new ways of worshiping you, new ways of being church. Help us to be leaders in our congregation and also in the greater community with other congregations. There's a lot of work to be done, and you need a lot of servants. So fill us, inspire us, and send us to be the heart, hands, and feet of Jesus so that all may experience real life in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So thanks for jumping on today. And let's start with questions. Any questions or reflections about things we've talked about to this point? Any carryover from the previous 2 weeks?
Yeah, I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I didn't finish chapter 4. Sadly.
Well then, okay,
No.
I'm gonna mute you right now. I'm gonna
Okay,
mute
no,
you.
wait.
I'm kidding, Barb.
No, I didn't finish it was chapter 3 I didn't finish, I think, because I'm wondering if there is a definite definition for organizational intelligence. Or no, what was it? Yeah, I think it was the organization, because I think there are inferences to it, but is there a definite definition that I could
Well-
write down?
Well, let's talk about intelligence, period. Okay. So let's start there. So there's different kinds of intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to solve problems. That's what intelligence is. So when we're assessing the intelligence of apes or the intelligence of dolphins, where the way they test that is they see, are they able to use tools? Can they solve problems in order to feed themselves or care for others? That's intelligence, is the ability to solve problems. When you take an IQ test, an intelligence quotient test, it's all problems that you're solving, right? This number comes, then that number, then this number, then this number. What's the next numbers in the sequence? Problem solving. So intelligence per se is the ability to solve problems. Now, when we talk about intelligence, there are different kinds. There's cognitive intelligence. That's what IQ is. There's emotional intelligence. What emotional intelligence is about is being aware of one's emotions, being intuitive toward the emotions of others, and having a knowledge, a wisdom, and experience in how to assess emotions, healthy emotions versus unhealthy emotions, how to manage emotions, how to engage. Same thing with relational intelligence, right? Relational intelligence is the ability to assess relationship, be self-aware, and so forth. Organizational intelligence, the way I'm defining it, is I'm focusing on culture, right? And so organizational intelligence starts with an awareness of the current culture, and an ability to assess the current culture, vision of future culture, and map the direction to get there, and then maintain that direction, right? So somebody who's organizationally intelligent, they have great awareness of their current culture that they're living in, and they're constantly assessing what aligns, what doesn't align in the culture. And what do we need to adjust? What don't we need to adjust? How do we address the problems that we face? Now, a point I just keep making over and over and over in the book is you're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. And someone who is organizationally intelligent, they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to be able to become aware of those mistakes quickly. You'll start to see pretty quick, this isn't aligning, right? How can I say this? Very often the organizationally intelligent people sees what others can't see, is aware of what others aren't aware of. and is the one to say we have a problem and we've got to adjust this. We have to address this, right? And that's hard work. It's really difficult to be organizationally intelligent. Not everyone will be. Not everybody has a high IQ. You know, let's just be honest. Our IQs aren't all the same. Not everybody is emotionally intelligent. Not everybody is relationally intelligent. Not everybody's going to be organizationally intelligent. So we want to try to help pastors and congregational leaders to grow in their organizational intelligence, recognizing that not everybody's going to be able to do that. And so this is why it's really important that you get the right people in the right roles, because if you have a pastor or you have congregational leaders that are not organizationally intelligent and don't have the capacity for that, you're going to just constantly be banging your head against the wall. Pastor Pat.
Once you get there, what's going to happen?
Once you get to become organizationally intelligent,
Yeah,
you're in pain. You're in pain. You're in pain all the time because you see the problems all the time. You see everything that's tough. Yeah. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me.
Well, I'm still concerned about theology. What is the theology? Once you get there, say you understand and you've organized a church the way you want it to, then what? I mean, what are you going to, maybe I'm not intelligent, I'm back where the monkeys or something. But I'm having trouble. Okay, so you're all organized. Then once you're organized, what do?
You live the culture. You live the culture. So the culture is built on the values, right? So our values are in authentic worship, intentional relationship, sacrificial service, radical generosity. Everything at Abiding Hope is organized around those 4 values. Everything we do has to draw people into those values, that culture. We're immersing people into that culture. So once you have it organized and structured, that's what you're doing. You're immersing people into the culture. You're living the culture. So our outreach ministries live the culture. Our worship ministries live the culture. Our small groups live the culture. Graceways lives the culture. Everything has to. And the architect, the cultural architect, is standing in the crow's nest or flying at 30,000 feet to make sure everything's aligning, right? And if something starts to be an outlier, it's not living the culture, then it can't be a part, it has to be addressed. Let me just say that, it has to be addressed. Let me give you an example of a ministry at Abiding Hope that doesn't fit the Abiding Hope culture. Book club. Our book club doesn't live our culture. Worship, relationship, service, generosity. It's a group of people who enjoy reading books, get together once a month to talk about the book. That is not, we don't count it as an Abiding Hope ministry. We don't, and if we don't count it as an Abiding Hope ministry, we don't devote money to it or staff to it. So book club meets at Abiding Hope. They can publicize when they're meeting in our stuff. We can have a little announcement on the screen, but we don't devote any resources toward it because it's not immersing people into the Abiding Hope culture. It's a social group.
Even though it's developing relationships?
That's only one aspect of the culture.
So
how is it drawing?
All 4?
It has to be all 4. All 4 values have to be in everything we do for it to be our culture. So we don't have a worship focus. We don't have we don't have a ministry that's just worship. We don't have a ministry that's just relationships. We don't have a ministry that's just generosity. All 4 things have to be in everything. That's the matrix. That's the cultural development. And so if we have a ministry that's not doing that, doesn't mean necessarily we have to get rid of it. Pam Nesselhuff, who's the leader of the book club, Pam gets it and she's fine. We just want to read books, get together and talk about it. Great. We don't need staff involvement. We don't need money. All we want to be able to do is every once in a while put out a little announcement that shows when we're meeting and what books we're reading. Okay, we can do that, right? But it's not, no one's lives are going to be transformed simply through book club. But lives should be transformed through small groups. Lives should be transformed through outreach work. Lives should be transformed through worship because it's involving the whole of the culture, right? And that's the focus.
Another thing that Pat was saying is like, well, then when you get everything lined up, what do? Well, you keep going. You don't just sit there and say, okay, everything's fine. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to change anything.
Well, you're constantly correcting, right?
Yeah.
You're constantly adjusting. You're constantly evaluating and assessing,
Yeah.
constantly, right?
Something about abiding hope is you always keep doing more.
Mhm.
Also, you know, you don't just stay stagnant. Well, or problem solving. You just seems like abiding hope is always.
We're always in movement. We're always in process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and just because we did it last year doesn't mean we're going to do it this year, right?
That's a good thing.
You know, it really is a good thing. And so, for instance, let me give you a real life scenario with our staff. As we're dealing with the pandemic, we have to constantly be discerning what can we do and what can't we do, right? So as we're coming toward Lent and Holy Week, can we do a passion this year? Well, yes, we could. Same way we did Celebrate the Light. But then what did we do for Good Friday? And what do we do for Easter? Because if we're going to do a big production for Good Friday that's video, and a big production for Passion that's video, do we have the capacity to do that? We don't have the capacity to do that. It's too much. It's way too much. Glenn's filming. He's having to film around the snow. We don't just film in the worship center. We film out and about, right?
Yeah.
We just got over 2 feet of snow. We can't film outside for Good Friday. You know, it's affecting things. So he's having to adjust, whatever. So it's my job to be able to say, yeah, it's okay. We don't have to do a passion this year. It'll be okay, right? We'll focus on Good Friday. The question is, do we focus on Good Friday or the passion? And I said, let's focus on Good Friday because we have to have Good Friday. We can do a Palm Sunday the weekend before, but we got to have a Good Friday. Maundy Thursday, we're not having a video for Maundy Thursday. We have stuff that we're giving out to people, inviting them to do it at their homes. Why? Because what do we have the capacity to do, and what don't we have the capacity to do? And how do we continue to build the Abiding Hope culture? Do we do things just because we always did it? Or do we do things because it's missionally relevant to do it, right? And so that's how we're constantly discerning. And and anytime you change, I'm going to get emails from people like, no passion.
Yeah.
Pastor Doug, no passion. We had Celebrate the Light. How come we didn't have passion? And then I got to write. We don't have the with everything else we're producing, we don't have the staff time and capacity to do this. And some will understand and some won't.
Yeah.
And oh well, but that's just the reality of how things work.
Well, and the things you do well.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
Why should we try to do everything and none of it good?
Yeah.
You know, let's do. If we're going to do something, we're going to do it well.
Yeah.
Rick Barger always said, "We have an excellent God, and we have an excellent God, and so what we give God should be excellent." And that relates to me. Not perfect. We're not saying perfect, right? Shouldn't be perfect, but it should be excellent. It should be good. It should be our best. You don't give. My mother used to say, "Don't give God crumbs. Don't give God crumbs. Don't eat all the cookies yourself and give God the crumbs. You give God the very best you can give." And my mindset is that should be the case all the time. That no matter what I do, I should be doing my best. And recognizing my best changes from day to day. Some days I do better than other days, right? When I'm rested and fed, I do better than when I'm tired and hungry, right? I'm a hangry person. Any hangry people in the room that when you get hungry, you get angry? That's me. And so we're called to do our best all the time, and that we really try to do that at Abiding Hope. But we have so many gifted people on our staff and in the congregation. It's embarrassing. Celebrate the Light. A friend of mine who's a Jewish rabbi, he works at Kavod Senior Living, which is a Jewish nursing home in Denver. He's the chaplain there. And he asked me before Christmas, he said, "Are you going to produce any kind of Christmas videos or anything that I could share with the Christians who are in our center. And I said, oh yeah, we'll have something we call Celebrate the Light. We'll have Christmas Eve. He said, can you send me the links to those? Absolutely. Well, after he watched Celebrate the Light, he called me up. He's like, that came from your church? I said, yeah. Were those paid performers? No, they're all members of Abiding Hope. Those are all members of your church? Yes. Those singers, those kids, they're members? Yes, they're all members of the church. He couldn't believe it, right? Because what church has that kind of talent? What mainline churches out there have the kind of talent we have at Abiding Hope? And so we don't have an excuse for just doing things haphazard. We really do need to do things well because we have the capability of doing that. What else? Other questions, thoughts?
I was just going to point out to you, because I know you appreciate this. On your
Oh,
next,
the typo, I found it.
no, what is the typo? This was on your next edition where it says on page 124, it's talking about you will greet people as they arrive with a warm handshake or a hug.
Yeah.
That'll sound so 2019.
Oh, I know. I know. It's so 2019. Back when we were willing to touch each other.
I know.
I know. Yeah. On the contrary, you will greet people as they arrive with a warm. You know what's funny that you bring that up, Susan? So the editor called me up and from Fortress on that page and laughing, and he said, I'm actually the kind of guy that does hand people a wine list when they come to my house. Because I said, no, who does that? Nobody does that, right? I've never gone to a party and the host hands me a list of their wines. The editor, and I guess this is what you want in an editor, right? Somebody who's that detailed and anal.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said, I actually do that. When people come to my house, I have wine options and I label them and I give people a list of what they are. Like,
That's
okay,
funny.
all right. We're just going to leave that in the book though, right? He laughed. He said,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I'll leave that in.
Well, it'd be interesting when we come back, to touching people, how anxious, because when we first started shaking hands, oh my gosh, I had one lady in my first church that insisted on wearing gloves to church so she didn't have to touch people's hands, actually.
Wow.
So, it's going to be a little awkward at first, I think.
I think for some, I'm a people person. I'm a touch person. I've been hugging people through the pandemic, wearing a mask, and because I need that personally. I need human touch. It's important to me. I'm very careful in how I hug women and children, of course, at the church. I'm very aware of that, very careful about it. But personally, as a human being, touch is something that's really important to me. And so during the pandemic, I've been safe, but at times I've been with friends or people in our small group and we hug. I hug the staff, those that want hugs. Some of them don't. We have staff people that don't. They sit all the way across the room and I just wave at them, right? But those that want hugs, they can get a hug from me. I kind of have my bubble of people that I've been around through the pandemic, and those folks I've been willing to hug. When I'm vaccinated, I'm going to hug people if they're willing to be hugged. If they want to be hugged, that's fine. I will be willing to do that. Trust me, first day back to church, I'm hugging whoever wants to be hugged. And I'm getting my first shot next Wednesday, by the way. I'm really excited.
Wow.
Good.
Okay.
I'm really excited.
The opening of a church is apt to be one group of people running across the field, just please hug, 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 and others going, not yet.
Huh.
Right, yeah.
So,
Walking away, walking around. Yeah. Right.
so is it the whole Senate still that's not in house?
Yeah, the recommendation from the Synod office, Synod Council still is to not be having in-person services. If you do, keep it to a small number. But yeah, that's the counsel we're still getting from the Synod. Actually, what's a lot of the reports we're hearing right now is that there could be a surge a new surge with COVID, with the new variants that have come out. One variant has the potential of becoming kind of the dominant strain, and so we're hearing until we have a majority of people vaccinated, we just still have to be careful, and that's what we're choosing to do. We're doing this well. It's not preferred. This is not preferred for me. I'd rather be in the church with you ladies today, and having this conversation. But we're doing it, and it's working. People are saying the church is closed. Church is not closed. The church is mobilized. We're in the world, and Abiding Hope is doing a ton of ministry right now. A ton of ministry. But people are hurting. They're struggling. We had a young man, graduate from Dakota Ridge 2 weeks ago, student in Arizona, college in Arizona, Jeremy's age, Ainsley's age. All our kids know him, and he took his own life while he was in college 2 weeks ago. And it's horrific. It's tragic. But again, we can't blame the pandemic. We had that problem before the pandemic. This is something that we deal with in this community is suicide, and it's an ongoing issue. The pandemic certainly isn't helping, and the strain and stress on young people is real. But we're going to have a lot of work to do once we get back together. Sue's point about who's going to be guarded, who's going to be open, we're going to have a lot of work. I don't know how things are going to be when we get back together.
There was some doctor yesterday on the news was saying that folks that have mental health issues, and she mentioned OCD, which I happen to be at certain times, and or maybe most of the time, who knows? But she said, because I have really enjoyed the pandemic, because I have been closed in and felt very, very secure. And people with maybe with my issues, we may have a more difficult time. I know I'm going to be very, very careful, because I'm still careful even in this hotel, that I wear my mask, I socially distance, and I wash my hands all the time, and I'm not engaging in stuff. Yeah.
I wonder, that's an interesting point, Barb. I wonder how many people will have become agoraphobic, fear of crowds, fear of outdoor places, as a result of the pandemic. And think about children that have been born in the last couple of years. This is all they know. They only meet people with masks on, right? No one else is picking them up, holding them, touching them. Some of them haven't seen their grandparents in a year. And how are they going to respond to the changes as they develop? So there's a lot of things we're going to have to be paying attention to. But let me bring this back to culture, because I think this is all relevant to culture. If we have a culture that's accepting, that's gracious, that is hospitable, we can manage through this. But if we have a culture where everybody has to either not wear masks, or everybody has to wear masks, or everybody has to touch, or everybody, has to stay away from each other, if we're trying to manage or control things that way, I don't think we'll be successful. But if we live our values and accept people where they are, and give people the freedom to make their own choices and how they engage and so forth, I think we'll be okay. But it is going to take us years. It's not going to be quick. It's going to be years to recover from this pandemic. In fact, I've been thinking, as I've been contemplating my story, my family, I'm thinking about my grandparents, and both of my grandmothers had this thing with germs. If you drop something, you don't pick it up and eat it. And you keep the door closed so bugs don't come in, and all this stuff. And I'm wondering if it was because of the Spanish flu that had affected how people think about infection, disease, illness, and that generation just got really, particular about that. Will that happen to us? Will our kids and young people, will they have that mindset about viruses and spreading of disease and so forth as a result of this experience? I don't know.
my mother was like that. Our house was spotless. My mother
Yes.
had TB at 20 and almost died.
Mm.
And her whole life, she was afraid the tuberculosis was coming back. And I was raised in a home where I knew they loved me, but they didn't touch me much. And, you know, and it shaped me. It shaped me. But there
Absolutely.
was a time, every time I saw the TB, remember they had buses, I'd hop on and get a X-ray. I wonder if I'm bothered because I just, you know, I definitely was affected by what happened to her. So
Yeah. Yeah. Susan.
So can I ask, so as I was reading this, was that chapter 4, I think?
Mhm.
No, actually, I was into chapter 5. And you were talking about how at Abiding Hope, since I've not attended Abiding Hope since we've had live services,
Mhm.
that you don't announce events and activities and things like that, that it's through
Not every,
relationships.
we can't announce every individual thing. We only announce ministries that affect the whole community.
So what would a normal, like, let's say I was a visitor
Mhm.
and we were having in-person worship, what would my experience have been? How would I have gotten connected to people? Especially, I mean, I guess I'm different in that obviously it hasn't stood in my way. I've gotten active, but I'm curious about what a normal visitor would experience and how do you connect them? And especially when you're like, pastors we're too big to have individual relationships with a pastor.
With everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm very mindful. There are people at Abiding Hope who Jay's their pastor, I'm not, or Laura's their pastor, I'm not, right? And people know who I am. Everybody knows who I am because I'm the big loudmouth guy up front all the time, and so they know who I am, but I may not know their names. I may not know much about them. So that's a reality as if you want to grow and develop a congregation. Now, if you want to keep a congregation of 175, under 200 people, that's fine. You know, if there's a church out there that the pastor wants to know everybody and everybody wants to be known by the pastor, that's fine. Name it. But you're not going to grow past 200 if that's your focus. Hey, brother Dick. So Susan, what I've heard from people over many years is that Abiding Hope is not a friendly church. We are not a friendly church. We're a cliquish church. People have their friends and they hang out with their friends, and new people would come in and not be spoken to. No, you know, and so we have a lot of signs to help people find their way around the building. And we hopefully train our ushers and greeters to be very outgoing and reaching out to folks, so that there can be some level of human connection. When we do get back together, we're going to be, again, culture. We're going to be talking to the congregation on Sunday mornings about greeting other people and greeting each other and how to do that and how to do it in a safe way. It's been a while since we've done any kind of training on how to talk to a new person, but your longtime members at a big church are afraid to greet new people because what they're afraid of is walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, is this your first time here or are you new?" And the other person says, "I've been a member for 20 years. Right. And then you feel like a jerk.
In there.
Yeah, you feel like a jerk. So you don't ask, "Are you new?" You walk over and you say, "I don't think I know your name."
Right.
And that works.
Right. And that works.
yes.
And I'm Doug, and I've been here, and I say, I've been here for 17 years. You know, I've been a member for 17 years. I'm surprised I don't know you. And then you let them say, "It's my first time," or "I'm new." And then you go, "Oh my goodness, wow, we're so glad you came," right? And now you can learn about the person. But we have to train people how to do that. And most at Abiding Hope aren't going to do that. They don't do that, but we want them to do that. We want people looking around, sharing the peace or greeting people during worship in the pews saying, "Hey, I don't know your name," right? And just get to know one another. People tend to sit in the same areas you know, same sort of general areas in worship. Do you know the folks who sit around you? And if you see a face you've never seen before, ask them their name. Don't ask them if they're members of the church. I don't care if they're a member of the church. That's irrelevant, right? Ask them their name, and then start asking about who they are in their life, and what, you know, what brings them to church or something like that. Talk about who, real life situation stuff. Don't walk up to somebody and say, "Are you new?" You know, that is that how you greet people at Walmart? Are you new? First time at Walmart? You know, Sue.
I've got several comments now. One thing I hope always remains the same in Abiding Hope is there is so much grace of time during the exchange of the peace. That's when the friendliness really exudes, because there were times when you're all over the sanctuary saying, "Hey, how's your week been? I haven't seen you for a while," and so forth. Second point, one time the deacons were asked to move around in the sanctuary and sit in different places each week. I was in Resurrection Sound, and the first Sunday deacons started doing that. We're going, "Why is he sitting over there? He belongs over there in that pew." And we were just completely distracted, because we all tend to do that. Here in Payson, our little churches don't know how to be friendly either. And it's especially disappointing when the exchange of peace comes and all of a sudden it's like, "Come on, get back. We got to go on with worship." This is part of worship. So that's an extremely important time in our worship service.
It's a critically important time. And this is also why we added several years ago a greeting moment at the beginning of the service. So we created 2 opportunities every worship service for people to greet those around them. You do it toward the beginning when we say, "Let's all stand up," you know, and greet those around you. And then we do it during the sharing of the peace. And guess what? You can do it during communion too, right? As you're in line, or as you're walking up, or when you come back and you say a prayer and you can visit with somebody quietly beside you. This idea that you have to sit quiet in church is not how the early church functioned. In the early church, there were no seats. The reason, have you ever been to Catholic Mass and they ring the bell during the communion, during the Eucharist, when they consecrate the elements?
Yeah.
The reason they did that was to get everybody's attention. That's why they rang the bell. "Hey, we're consecrating the elements now. Everybody pay attention." Because guess what everybody was doing during church? They're visiting with each other, because they had church in public settings. They didn't have church buildings in the early church, and they would go to these public settings. People would come together and they're doing business together, and they're connecting, and they're doing relationship building during church. And so when the Mass was being consecrated or celebrated, they have to ring the bell to get everybody to, "Okay, stop doing what you're doing and pay attention to this," right? Because this important thing is taking place. Church, we need a level of reverence. We need a level of silence for contemplative kinds of things, but we also need a high level of relational opportunities. And that's kind of where we have failed. We haven't done that well. We relate with the people we know and that we feel comfortable with, but we're really not that great at reaching out of our comfort zones. Some people do it really well, but there are very few. There are very few.
You know what? Okay. It depends on my mood, whether I want to shake hands with people or not. If I'm in a dark place or a healing place or a dry spell, I may not want to shake people's hands around me. I may want to sit in the narthex. I may want to, and I am one of these movers that I don't sit in the same place all the time. I sit wherever I feel like sitting, whenever I feel like it, you know? And I kind of like that, but it was hard for me I can remember telling Stacia that I sometimes just don't like to share the peace. I don't want to be touched. I just don't want that.
And who's the subject in that sentence?
Me.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah.
When we first joined Abiding Hope, we did not find it a friendly church at all. However, we loved that you happened to be in Haiti in an earthquake on that Sunday. And we were so impressed with Pastor Chad and what he did and how he brought the whole congregation together. And we walked out and I said to Dick, do you think we just were in a tent revival? But I mean, it was like, I mean, it was the church itself that brought us back. It certainly was not the people. But you also have to get engaged. There's a certain amount that is on the person that's joining. And
That's
so we joined Graceways, and that started a little group here. And then I started funerals and a little group there. And, you know, so I think there's a certain amount of responsibility on the person joining the church too.
Absolutely.
If you're not going to participate, you're not going to get friends.
I'd like to interject something there, and I agree with everything Ann just said. But when somebody's not a church-going person, and to have them walk in and feel, number one, they may be confused. They don't even know what the order of service is. And there's a whole lot of things like that. They're already tense because they've walked into an unfamiliar situation. And so sometimes if you're an introvert, you're not going to reach out much anyway. And when you leave, you may or may not have gotten a whole lot out of the encounter.
But have you ever been to a church where they've totally run over you the first time you go in?
Yeah.
That's worse.
I have. My brother's church is like that, but it's a very small community church. And when you walk in, they know that you're not the normal.
Oh,
They know
absolutely.
you're not one of them.
And that's horrible.
It's
No,
awful.
actually, it's very
They
warm and
basically
nice
want to know
situation.
your
Well,
education before you
you're
leave.
related to somebody there.
That's what I
if-
say. Oh, I'm Scott's sister. Oh, okay, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah, you know.
Listen, do you know how many nightmare stories I've heard from people who said, I'm never going back to that church because they walked in the first time. Pastor comes out to do announcements, says, "Oh, we have some new people.
Would they stand
up
up?
and tell us, stand up and tell us
Yeah.
about you."
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you do. That you to your guests, you bring them in and you humiliate them in front of everybody. I would stand up and go, "All right, I got something to say," right? Because I love.
That would be difficult.
But
That
an
would be
introvert, my
uneasy.
wife, if somebody did that to Carrie, oh my God, she's never going back. So when we coach other congregations, especially smaller congregations, we tell them, don't do that. Don't single people out, and then don't hover around them. You know, everybody just kind of like a beehive just goes right over to the new people, and they stand there and they grill them to get information from them. And we want you to join our church. We hope you like our church. Is there anything you need? Will you come back to our church? You know, and it comes across as needy, not loving. It comes across like, we need more people in our pews so we can pay our bills. Will you come and join us?
Yes, it does.
You know why most churches want to grow?
To get money.
Money.
Get more money.
Pay the bills.
Pay the bills. That's exactly right. So this is something I talk about with young pastors all the time. Do not see people as dollar signs. Don't do that, right? And what you see in the book as you're reading through the book, the goal is not to get everybody into church. That's not the goal. Not everybody's going to come to church. The goal is for the congregation to create a culture that they live that spills out of the congregation into homework, school, neighborhood, and beyond, that enculturates other people into the Jesus way of life without it being at church. So to Cheryl's point, you know, hospitality is great and we have to do it. And we're not great at it at Abiding Hope. That is a growing edge for us. I think there are churches out there, and some of them are smaller, that are really good at hospitality, that know how to greet people, know how to make them feel comfortable, and not be offensive or off-putting and so forth. But the other thing too I want to say is, when you greet people at the church, it has more power than when I greet people at the church. And you might think that's a strange statement, but it's my job. That's why I'm there, right? I'm there to lead the congregation through worship and greet people and to listen to people. If you go to somebody and you greet them, you did that on your own. No one forced you to do that. And people don't rate the hospitality level of a congregation based on the personality of the pastor. They rate it on the people. Are the people hospitable, right?
Hmm.
Is the congregation as a whole hospitable? But again, don't, like Cheryl was talking about, I've been in places where I'm the guest, because when I travel and when I'm on sabbaticals and things, I go to other churches. I want to see what other churches are doing. I've been in that place where they just like, you know, and you've got 20 people around you at once and they're doing it. And I don't mind that because I'm such an extrovert, but my wife, Carrie, that is so off-putting to her. And she's like,
Well,
we're not going back to that church, right?
in this particular church, there's not 20 that come up. There's
Yeah.
about 3
Great.
that will, you know, something like that, but.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
The first time I went over to Christ the King, of course, they knew I was not, you know, that I was new and everything, but they were very good about it. Oh, you know, and who are you and stuff. And it was just nice. They didn't like swarm you, but they made, you know, they knew you were new, that's for sure, you know, because they know everybody and stuff. But it, you know, it was comfortable, welcoming. And I did it at Mighty Hope. My first time too was great. I never felt like some people say, you know, it's not friendly. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's the best, you know, and stuff. But
A lot of it is your personality too, you know, I think.
just a big mouth.
No, I think
No.
that, I don't think Margaret's ever met a stranger.
Yeah.
No, Margaret is wonderful at that. But speaking of Christ the King, we've gone to a lot of Lenten services and their noon services
Yeah.
over there. They excel at that.
Yeah.
They
They're good at it.
don't put themselves on you and make you feel like you've got to tell them your whole life story, and yet they're always very friendly and very welcoming.
Yeah.
I think Christ the King that's one of their very strong points.
They're good at that. They're good at that. Mhm.
Well, Ann and Dick got me to Abiding Hope, and immediately I hung onto them and sat with them and still do. But it's also helpful to have somebody that then afterwards introduces you to people. So that was, so I didn't have any trouble there at all, mainly because I knew somebody already.
Yeah. So
Me too.
the key in the book is about hospitality versus information, right? And a lot of churches wrongly, what they do is they just make flyers and put flyers out and, you know, have a website and think that's going to draw people to the church. It doesn't. It certainly doesn't keep people in the church. And so I'm an advocate for relational hospitality, person to person, people getting to know each other, but it has to be a part of the culture. We can programatize it. We can have a team of people that are responsible at every worship service, ushers, greeters, whatever, to greet people and to be hospitable toward folks. But it's better and more elegant. The goal is to have it enculturated to where everybody there knows. If you see somebody you don't know, ask them their name. Just, you know, build a relationship. Just have a conversation. And if we can get that into the whole of the congregation, oh my goodness, wow, that would be awesome. Other thoughts, questions, reflections?
Yeah, I want to know, where do you see yourself reading this? I can see a lot of you in this, but
Oh, yeah, I hope so. I wrote it.
yeah, well, yeah, but where do you see yourself in this? Are you the cultural architect? Are you the adaptive leader?
What do you think, Barb?
I think you are, but
Well, thank you.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I couldn't write about it if it wasn't. Basically, what you're seeing in the book is my approach to pastoral leadership.
yeah.
This is what I believe. This is how I practice congregational development as a pastoral leader, right? So as an adaptive leader, all leaders should be adaptive. And adaptive doesn't mean that the leader adapts. It means that the leader is able to create a system, a culture that when people participated in it, they're changed, right? They're transformed. That's what an adaptive leader does. An adaptive leader identifies the culture that currently exists and envisions a future culture, and then can map the course, creating it, and immerses people into it. And the people being immersed are changed. They're transformed. So a lot of people misunderstand Ron Heifetz and adaptive leadership. They think it's a leader who can adapt, a leader who's nimble, right?
Oh,
And that's not what adaptive leadership is.
oh,
It's not being a nimble leader. It's being able to create a community, a culture that is transformative in people's lives, that changes. You're transforming the whole culture. That's an adaptive leader. You're adapting the culture. That's what it's about.
but being that, you personally have to be adaptive and flexible to be able to do that, don't you think?
Well, flexibility again is a key component to congregational vitality. So a congregation that is inflexible, in other words, they will not change. They're going to struggle with congregational vitality, right? And so a congregation that is willing to change, not change for the sake of change. You know, back in the 90s when non-denominational churches were growing and all of us in the mainline said, well, we just got to have rock bands for worship and then we'll grow too. We all got rock bands for worship and none of us grew. It was like, wait a minute, how come they got rock bands and they're growing and we don't and we have rock bands now and we're not growing? Because it's not about having a rock band. It's about the culture of the organization. It's the theology, the messaging, how the culture you're immersing people into. It was way bigger than that. And we in the denomination, the mainline denominations, we didn't understand all of that. And so we were trying to mimic the churches that were growing and we didn't grow. Because that's not our style. That's not our history. We're not good at it. And B, we didn't understand. We thought if you just rearrange the deck chairs a little bit, the Titanic won't sink. And that doesn't work. And so the adaptive leader is the one who can take a step back, look at that and go, wait a minute, it's not just about worship style. Worship matters and we want to do it excellent. But you can grow a church with traditional worship the same way you can grow a church with contemporary worship, as long as it's done well and serves the culture of the organization. That's the key. And so that's adaptive leadership. Does that make sense, Barb?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
I thought one of the interesting things was your discussion on finding that first group of people that you needed to have people that were intuitive.
Innovative,
sorry. And so that and there's only a very small percentage of people who fall into that category.
2.5%.
Yeah. And for somebody that doesn't have an N in my Myers-Briggs, I can appreciate that because that's not a strength of mine. And it's not necessarily just finding active people in the church to put on that team. It's finding the right the right talent within those people who have that gift.
That's exactly right. 99% of the time, it's virtually all the time, but there are some examples that break this rule, like in small communities, rural communities, Iowa, Nebraska, and so forth. But 99% of the time, if you have a congregation of 50 people, you don't have any innovators and you don't have any early adopters either. They're gone. They left. They've been gone for a long time. The people who are left are the people who are entrenched and doing things the same way, and they don't know, they can't envision a different way. They can't create it. They don't have those gifts. 25% of the population, if you use Myers-Briggs, 25% of the population are N's, intuitives, which are the big picture visionary kind of people. 75% are S's, sensates, right? When I preach, I know who all the N's are at Abiding Hope. I know who the big picture people are, because when I preach a sermon that's primarily just theology and big picture stuff, they're the people who come out and say, that sermon was amazing. And 75% walk out going, I don't know what that sermon was about. Right? So the sensate people need me to make it tangible, and they got to see it, taste it, smell it, feel it. And that's 75% of the population. This is why a lot of seminary professors are not great preachers, because they're preaching to the 25% intuitives who like the theoretical big picture kind of stuff. But 2.5% of the population are innovators. These are people who are key visionary ideation people, come up with, new ways of doing things. They're not the ones necessarily to enact it, but they come up with the ideas. And then 13.5% are the early adopters. They're the ones who they get vision when they see it, and they can begin to bridge the gap to how to live into that. That's 16%. If you have 50 people in a church, right, that would mean 2.5%, you're going to have one innovator, and then 13.5% out of 50, so it'd be 13, you're going to have 6, 7. So 8 people, maybe, if it represented the general population and the whole congregation, that could begin this process. But the reality is they're gone. Innovators and early adopters do not hang around in systems that are stuck, because they get frustrated.
Is there any way to reverse that?
Yeah, that's why the anchor church. So you borrow innovators, you borrow early adopters from the anchor church, from the healthy church. You bring them over, you build relationship, you build trust, and you use the innovators and early adopters from the other congregation, and through their trust. It's the early adopters that are the key. It's at 13.5%, because what they do is they're the ones who get the change that needs to happen, and they have relationships with the early majority, with the 34% that then will come on board with them, just because they have relationships, not because the early majority understands the change or even likes the change. They simply come on board because they have relationships with the early adopters who are telling them, this is awesome, this is going to be great, right? Sue, you're going to love this, come with me, you got to be a part of this. And they bring, once you get to that 50% point, it's an S curve. Once you get to the 50%, that's right in the middle of the climb on the S curve. You're there. You're there. And then the late majority comes on board, and then the laggards, the last 16%, never come on board. They complain about everything. And you've just turned the culture. But so when we're helping a small church, we have to provide the innovators and the early adopters, let them build relationships, and then the rest will come.
I have a question about, like, excuse me, the groups that you're working with in other states, other synods to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see them often enough? Do you know if they're getting it?
Some are. So that's a great question, Dana. I have a meeting today with the bishop and the entire bishop staff, plus several, 10 or 15 pastors from the synod in southwestern Pennsylvania. It's my home synod where I grew up. Right. And the bishop read my book and called me or emailed and said, we got to talk. And so I have a Zoom with them today at 1:30, from 1:30 to 3. And they want to enact this in the entire synod, which is kind of cool.
Pennsylvania?
Southwestern PA, exactly. And thank you. And you know what the bishop said to me? He said, Doug, we don't have a pastor here who could understand your system.
I agree with that.
And he said, and the parishioners definitely aren't going to understand the system. So we're going to have to really pare it down into basic language, and we're going to have to translate for you. And I said, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. And he's like, no, you haven't been here in a long time. So
you're the anomaly.
Yes, exactly. So we'll see. Some of the people we've trained and put through the process are rocking it. We've got a pastor. Well, I use the example of the congregation in Rapid City, South Dakota in the book. They're doing great stuff. We've got a pastor in Florida who is dean of his conference, and they've got 5 or 6 churches in his conference that don't have pastors. And they've been struggling to figure out, how do you care for these congregations and so forth. Well, Anchor Church is going to work. It's going to work for them. And he's, talking to the bishop's office, the directors for evangelical mission, and it's taken off. We've got a pastor near Philadelphia. He's actually in a suburb of Philadelphia, and they've got 2 little churches, ELCA churches, in the same town. And now they're beginning to partner and doing ministry together and using each other's buildings as outposts for outreach and service into the community, using the Anchor Church model. So we have examples where it's happening, and then we have You know, there's a pastor in St. Louis, south of St. Louis, who she is partnering with a congregation near hers, and she's coaching the young. I don't know if it's an intern or if it's a young pastor. It's one of the two that's been called into this really small site near her, and they've just been struggling. They've just been stuck. And then they had a secretary, the church administrator died suddenly, unexpectedly, and that slowed things down. The pandemic has slowed things down for a lot of congregations. So some places it's taken off, other places it's a little slower. It is a huge, it's a paradigm shift, right, in our brains that takes people time to recognize and become aware of. Susan.
I'm just thinking that the pandemic may be something that aids in these the ability to make changes, sweeping changes, because
Absolutely.
we're in that. I was just talking with a friend this morning, and she said, you know, I'm finding that I'm just way more flexible. I just don't get bent out of shape over something that doesn't go exactly the way I think it should anymore. Because of
there you go. There you go. So in recent coaching so I coach I have 8. There are 4 pastors from the previous cohort that I continue to coach every other month. And there are 8 pastors in our current large cohort that I coach individually every other month. And I stagger all this. But our large cohort, we have 15 right now in our current large cohort. And so recently in one of our training sessions, what I talked about was don't reopen the same as you closed. Don't reopen the same congregation that you closed at the beginning of the pandemic. Reopen new in some way. Not so new that nobody knows who the heck you are, but new that says we've learned, we've adapted, we've grown, we've you know, that we're moving. So for instance, what we're doing at Abiding Hope right now, when we reopen, and again, when I say, okay, we're going to stay closed till August, I don't know if it's going to be August. That's just, I threw that out there so we have a target. But things we have going on right now that we couldn't do, we could do if we were open again, but I want to do now so that when we reopen, we send a message. We're rebranding. We're going through a brand refresh right now. So Rebecca Burris, who's our lead servant she's our director for marketing and communication. She's created some sample groups of people. We have a target demographic of who we're messaging toward, and it's women between the ages, I think, 30 and 45 that work out of the home or work in the home, have kids, married with kids. I mean, we have this whole demographic piece structured. So all of our language is being geared toward that group, with the idea that if we can get women between the ages of 30 and 45, we get their husbands and we get the kids too, right? And so this is what we're targeting. So Rebecca's she has sample groups that she's asking questions of and having conversation with. You're going to see our logo. We're going to come out with a new logo that will be a new iteration of our current logo. Some of our color schemes might change a little bit. The font we use might change a little bit. But when we reopen, we come back together, it's going to be a new Abiding Hope. It's going to be a different Abiding Hope. Not so radical that nobody gets us. Heart, hands, feet of Jesus, all that will still be the same. But the look and feel will be a little bit different to send the message, we're a new place and we're moving in a new direction. And so I think the pandemic is a wonderful gift for the church, forcing us to rethink everything. And if you're just going to go back to the way it was in 2019 before all this happened, good luck, because the world's not going to be, we're not going to be living in a 2019 world.
I mean, we should all be, it's an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, you know, and so it's almost a waste of everything we've been through unless we're really examining and taking away good things.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. But again, it's scary, right? Because change means someone's going to be unsettled. Somebody's going to be uncomfortable. Somebody's going to be upset.
But we've been that way because of the pandemic. Do you think that we're kind of more open to that change?
He's hoping he doesn't remember. We don't remember what the old was.
Well, that's a great question, Pat. I think it could go in either direction. I think it could make us more accepting of change, but it could drive some people to say, I've had to give up and change so much, I want my stability back, right? I want what I know. I want my comfort zone back. And I think it's a both and. I think that's a lot of the people who have been pushing for us to open to in person. I think that's a lot of it. I just want what's familiar, right? I want to know, I want to do what I know. I had one person say to me, my teenage daughter doesn't pray at meals anymore. She doesn't watch the worship service online. I can't force her to go to church. When we have church, I can force her to go to church. But when we don't have church, I can't force her to watch it online, right? It's a different dynamic. Well, I get that. I understand that. I understand the pressures of that. But guess what? Teenagers question their faith when we're together versus and when we're not together. That's just a normal part of faith development with teens, right? And so we're not going to just open the church because I need a place to bring my teenager. That's not a good enough reason. You see what I'm saying? But I think there are people who want to come back to the way things were because of they've lost so much and they feel so scattered and chaotic that they just want the familiar. I want what I know and what I'm comfortable with. So I think it's going to be both. I think there will be people who have grown spiritually and more accepting of change, and there will be people who have moved more toward, I just want what's familiar to me.
Do you see that first Sunday we're back? To me, it's going to be, just so much of personal, hi, how are you? Haven't seen you. Just a whole lot of that going on.
That's why it's going to be all day. So I want to have a party. We're going to have a party. I like to party. I like parties. So what I want to do is I want to have church and then go across the street to the park, and we're going to be community. We'll do it outside, right? We'll have food trucks and jumpy things for kids and some music. I want to do this big. And so come and worship. Now let's go across the street. Let's eat, let's play, and let's just be community together. And we'll invite the neighborhoods and the whole town. Everybody come. Just come on. Abiding Hope's having a party. That's what I want to do when we get back. So we can spend time together and visit and catch up and listen and laugh.
Well, that'll help people buy into things are going to be a little bit different also.
Well, sure. And that's part of my reasoning too. I don't want to just do a soft open. I want to do an opening. I like to. This is a grand reopening. God is back. I don't know what I know.
Go big or go home.
The churches here in Payson tried to do a in-person that don't resemble worship, for us at least, for several, because it's so difficult.
Sterile.
It's the pastors reading everything, no singing, no talking, no touching, 6 feet apart. I get it, but for us, that's very hard to even imagine that that's worship. There's no community in it at all. It's something that's just pushed to you. And now get out of here. No coffee. Nope, get out. And I'm glad you're waiting until it's going to be church again. No matter what the form of the worship, it's still going to be done well.
Right. We're doing our MLST is our mission, leadership, and support team. That's our council, 7 members. We don't have a 12-member council at Abiding Hope. We have a mission, leadership, support team, 7 people. We're still meeting online. We're meeting via Zoom. I asked them last week when we had our March meeting, I said, are you guys open to meeting in person if we do it outside? Maybe in my back deck or somebody else's back patio or something. Would you be open to that? And the group said, yes, we would be open to meeting in person as long as it's outside. There are people in the group that aren't willing to meet inside in person, and we have to respect that. All of the synod stuff I attend, it's, you know, I have a meeting here today at 11:30 when we're off for our local conference, synod conference. We meet via Zoom. All of the interfaith group I'm a part of in Denver, we meet via Zoom. Everything is still Zoom. And to Sue's point, when we do get back together, I want it to be really together. We're really together. We're not still having to do all of, and I understand protecting each other, protecting people, but if we can have the majority of people vaccinated, then let's do this. And those who are not vaccinated, they're welcome to come. Somebody who's not vaccinated won't be a threat to me when I'm vaccinated. So I don't care if you're not vaccinated, come to church. I don't care. You know, that's up to you. It's your choice, your decision. If you're not vaccinated when we reopen and you're still nervous, that's okay too, because we're going to still be online and we'll be providing worship for you. So my goal is to get us to a place where the majority of people are vaccinated and especially 100% of the staff, so that we're protected. And then we can begin to do this, and we'll let people do what's comfortable for them. There will be people who want to sit close together, and there will be others who want to distance, and we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. But we can't do it until more people are vaccinated.
You know,
What's
as
your-
difficult as all this has been, we've been so blessed to have Zoom. Think about
Right.
what it would have been like
I was
5
thinking
years
about
ago.
that, too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
listen, if this had happened in 1995,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done as a pastor. I honestly, I don't know. I think the church would have closed, because I don't know what we would have done, how we would have been able to engage people, continue to worship. No, thank God we have technology and we're able to use it this way.
I wonder what happened in 1919. You know, the church didn't die.
Well, they didn't close things. They just wore masks and they took their lives in their own hands. And you know, they were still going to ball games. If you go back to 1919, you can see pictures of people at Major League Baseball games just wearing masks, but they're all there. And people used to wear suits everywhere, right? The men would wear suits and the women would be dressed with hats and gloves.
Yeah.
And they would wear masks. And so churches just kept functioning. They kept doing everything they did. They went to work, they went to church, they went to school, they went to ball games and things. They just all wore masks. And a lot of people died.
They didn't have hand sanitizer like we do either.
They didn't have hand sanitizer. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Or Clorox wipes. I mean, they had soap, but you know, think how much more advantageous we've had this situation than what they did back then.
Oh, listen, they had outhouses. People dealt with stuff back then that we don't deal with. Dysentery, people would have dysentery. Things in the city, you know, the plumbing in the cities weren't great. There was just a lot of disease, a lot of issues, and folks were used to disease. Also, 100 years ago, everyone had a sibling that died. Both sides, all my grandparents had siblings that died. They died at birth, or they died, you know, when they were 2 or 3 years old. That was a common thing. You know, they didn't have the kind of medicines and healthcare that we have today. Women died at childbirth all the time. You know, there were all kinds of challenges and adversity. That generation, I'm not saying they ever got comfortable with death, but they dealt with death way more than we deal with death, right? And so hearing that 500, almost 600,000 people are going to die from, or have died from the COVID, that's like, are you kidding me? That's a staggering number. But 100 years ago, death was, you know, it happened a lot more than it happens today. Yeah.
When you talk about, you know, kids putting up with things. My mother had a great big scar on her bottom. She was sitting on the toilet and a big rat came along and bit her in the bottom in school. So that's what schools were putting up with.
Right.
Fortunately, it wasn't rabid, but
My mother's grandmother it was her stepdad's mother, actually, not a blood relative, but it was my mother's stepdad's mother. So like great grandmother to me. She lived on a farm. They had a farm. They had vineyards, and they had cattle and chickens and grew beans and things. They had an outhouse. They had a pump in the kitchen sink. It was a pump, so you pump and then the water comes out of the faucet, well water. And I remember going over there as a kid, and you have to go to the bathroom, you got to go out to the outhouse. And that was the most disgusting thing for me. It's like, I don't want to go in there. It smells really bad in there. Well, that's where you go to the bathroom, half moon carved into the door kind of thing. And nasty. But that was reality throughout history. Latrines, everybody had latrines. They didn't have flush toilets. Do you know why we call it where the word crap comes from? It comes from the guy's name who invented the toilet. Crapper was his name. He just died last year, 2 years ago or something. Yeah, the guy who invented the flush toilet, his name was Crapper. That's why we say crap.
Yeah.
I'm going to the crapper, because he said, I'm going to the crapper, right? That's just history. That's just reality. But this is a new thing.
Thank you for that wonderful tidbit of whatever it
Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Trivia.
Takeaway for today.
Yeah.
well, in England, if you you had a chamber pot and you just threw it out the front window and it went down the drain. If you happened to be under, you were in big trouble. So anyway,
Absolutely.
it
It wasn't just in England. They did that kind of stuff in New York too. That's. But how do you think the plague spread and all of those kinds of things? And people had 100 years ago, people were still dealing with polio and TB and all these kinds of things. So the Spanish flu, let's just wear masks and hopefully that'll protect us. But people were far more used to disease back then than we are today.
Our first church in Pennsylvania, we still had an outhouse and we had no running water. And they had a ludicrous dinner for 400 people and they used glass plates. And I had to eat with the women and Dick got to eat with the men. And we sat on opposite sides in the church, and we're talking 1974.
Very German, very German.
Very German.
Very German. Yeah.
Yeah, very bad experience.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
It wasn't.
Yeah, that would not be
Pleasure to do the
pleasurable.
dishes.
one of the churches when I was in Wisconsin didn't have they had an outhouse and they wanted to put a bathroom in and they had to add on to the back of the church, but the cemetery came up to the church. So they had to move some of the graves back so that they could have room to put a bathroom onto the church.
That's enough to split a church.
Yeah.
I've
We
seen
almost
churches.
lost a church because of a church cemetery.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen. Yeah. Wow. Holy cow. Well, thankfully, we're not dealing with those kinds of things today, right?
Fun
Those aren't
time.
the challenges we're facing today. It is an interesting time to be the church because I'm wondering what's coming. What's next for the church? The fact that we can do Zoom, that we have the technology to do these kinds of things, what do we see the church evolving into? I think the church is going to move towards smaller communities. I don't think, as we saw in the 90s, this movement toward bigger church, mega church, I don't think that's sustainable. I think that that relationships matter and that people are going to seek, the way our culture is evolving, it's less about information, it's more about relation, right? So whereas people used to go to church to learn about God, I think that people will be motivated to go to church or be part of a church to be in relationship with people who are living a certain way of life. And so it's not about people come to church so we can indoctrinate them, right? And give them information, which is what happened to all of us when we were growing up. It's you come to church to be with a community of people that you want to do life with and live certain values, the values of Christ, that hopefully will transform the world. So I think that happens in smaller communities, but there needs to be sustainability, there needs to be accountability, and that's where I think congregation comes in, that we'll have congregational structure with smaller communities that all part of that, and the congregation as a whole provides that accountability and sustainability. Susan.
I was just thinking about Judy Hirsch. Well, I think of her Judy Hirschheiser, Judy Schlierflick.
We
Yeah.
do too sometimes. Yeah.
Her Lenten devotion
Yeah.
that she just wrote, and about. I'm interested in thinking about looking at the book she was referring to, about how every 500 years the church has.
Yeah, that's Phyllis Tickle.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's called The Great Emergence.
yeah.
Right.
We had a Graceways on that.
We did
Yeah,
that.
We did Graceways.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay. Before my time.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So it's interesting too, what you're saying, because I watch my children are way more about experiences than having stuff. They want to have a smaller home. They don't want a lot of stuff. They want experiences.
Right.
And so that's more about relationship, which is interesting because with technology, we also see people moving away from relationship, right?
Well, we see relationship changing. How people relate is changing. So for us, I hate this. I don't like this at all. This to me is not relational. I don't feel relational, but my kids feel relational through this, because this is how they communicate with their friends is through FaceTime, through Snapchat, through these kinds of things. So my kids, this is nothing. Jeremy's going to college like this, and feels like he has a really close relationship with his professors that he's never in the same room with. But for me, this is hard. I don't like this. So I think there is some generational stuff there. To your point, Susan, this is why the Abiding Hope tagline is experience real life, because experience matters. Being authentic, let me say it that way, matters, right? But we chose real life instead of the word authentic there. And then life. It's about life, man. We all want to experience a full, rich, whole life. And so our tagline is trying to speak to that generation. It may not speak to us generationally, but it does speak to the younger generation. So we're very thoughtful at Abiding Hope in how we term things, how we communicate things, because it speaks to the culture that we're trying to create and invite people into. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
but
also business is online now. Linda Smith, who works for Allstate, used to go into the office all the time. Well, when this happened, she didn't. They closed the Denver office. Her main office now is in Phoenix, Arizona. She'll never go into the office again.
Right.
What's
Right.
happening?
Yep. And it'll be the same for us as in ministry too, Pat. There will be, as we come out of this, I actually in my morning meditation at 5 o'clock this morning. Anybody want to join me for morning meditation? I was actually thinking about this very topic. When we come back together, my office hours were always Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. And Wednesday, I'm writing, studying. Friday is my catch-up day. And then weekends, whatever we have on the plate. Do we go back to that? Or do we modify what office hours are, or how often we come back together for a full staff? Do people work more from home? I don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the staff about it. And I know that we need more time together than we have right now. That's a fact. It's really difficult right now for us not to be siloed in our own areas and just focusing on our own stuff. We need more interaction. We're having to fight that a lot, the siloing a lot. So when we come back together, we are going to have more time in the same room. But is it 3 days a week? Is it 2 days a week? How do we do this? And what's it look like? I don't know.
One thing Glenn said is that he thinks it'll be harder because he's still going to have to do the Zooms, the online services, but then he'll have to do in the church. He says, so it's probably going to be harder at first anyway.
Yeah. And so we have a plan to bring another full-time worship person on board to work with Glenn. so that he can have two, one that focuses on in-person, one that focuses on digital, but they support each other and they overlap. And he's got some ideas for musical instruments and things that we want them to be able to play, and how we go forward. So you're going to see, again, when we reopen in August, hopefully we have new staff people on board. You know, Pastor Laura is leaving, and she announced, and I just want to say there's no drama here. I know everybody's like, wait a minute, there must be a problem, right? She can't get along with Pastor Doug, or Pastor Doug's such a jerk. We all know he's a jerk, and we just can't believe she worked with him for 8 years. That's just unbelievable. There's no drama here. People change jobs. Pastors discern their call. I'm constantly discerning whether or not I'm called to abiding hope. Constantly. And all of us who are in ministry need to be in constant discernment about our call. There's no drama here. This is great for Laura. Laura's 36 years old, guys. She's a kid. She's 36 years old. I know she presents like she's 54 like I am, but she's not. She's 36. And she now has the opportunity. She's been working with us for 7 years, plus she was an intern for a year, so 8 years. And she's going to go out now and try to lead a congregation. Come on. Come on. Tell me that's not awesome and amazing and wonderful. Doesn't the church need more lead female pastors? And we're going to be with her every step of the way. So if you hear anybody say there has to be something behind the scenes, something going on, please say there isn't. There isn't. This is good. And by the way, she and I have been talking about this for months. This didn't just happen. I've known this was coming. She's been in a discernment period. She's been working with a spiritual director. She's been working with a life coach. She hired a life coach to help her. She's done incredible work on herself through this whole process. And she told me what she believed God was calling her to do. We didn't push her out. We just accompanied her through this discernment process because we love her. She's family, right? So please, if you hear people that are trying to create conspiracies, there isn't one. There isn't one. Her letter tells the truth, and my email on Tuesday tells the truth. And she's gonna go to great things. She's taking some time off. She doesn't have a call in hand right now because she wants time off between, so she can spend time with her kids, her husband,
She didn't
and
get
so
that
forth.
sabbatical, did she? Like,
She didn't get a sabbatical because the
because of the
pandemic hit.
Yeah.
She was supposed to be on sabbatical last year, and you can't do a sabbatical during a pandemic.
And she has actually been fabulous with the ministry's crucial conversations, spiritual companion group. I mean, it's
She's
really
ready.
flourished.
She's ready, man. She is ready. And we're gonna have either an informal or a formal anchor church relationship with wherever she lands. She's gonna stay in Denver. She's gonna stay around here because her husband works for the state and has a really good job. So we're gonna get to work with her. She's gonna stay a part of the Abiding Hope family. This is wonderful. This is good news. This isn't terrible. And then we get to figure out what's next for us. This gives us space to step back and think about, okay, do we just replace Laura, or do we bring somebody in kind of as a placeholder for a couple of years doing her stuff so we have time to think through how we can evolve the ministry? We have good options. This is wonderful. It's sad. I love Laura. I will do anything for her. She's like a little sister to me, although I could be her father, but we won't bring that up. I like referring to her as a younger sister work. She was with me during the earthquake. She was amazing when we were stuck in Haiti during that time. The roof fell on her, for God's sake, and she was bleeding, helping me get bags and things out of the hotel. It was remarkable. So please help me. I've gotten a few emails from people, as you can imagine. It's like, what's wrong? Why is she leaving? Is she mad? Is there something going on? No, there's nothing going on. She's been discerning her call, and she wants a new adventure where she can stretch her wings. That's it.
I've even gotten emails from our little group. What's going on with Pastor Laura?
Yeah.
Oh, we all did. Yeah.
People change jobs.
Oh, really? They do.
We're just spoiled at Abiding Hope. We really are, because we get really talented people and they stay for very long times. That's not most congregations. You know, the average stay of a pastor in the ELC is 4 to 5 years.
Wow.
4 to 5 years. Pastors come and go, right? And but not at Abiding Hope. We've had consistency for a very long period of time, and that's a wonderful thing. But then when the change happens, everybody's like, "What's up? What's going on? How come this is happening?" It's that Pastor Doug again, isn't it? He's such a jerk. He's chasing them out. They're all quitting because
We all figured.
So I need to bug out. We're supposed to finish the
Me
book
too.
for next week. Is that correct?
Yeah, finish the book, chapter 6, and look at the appendices. I do want to talk a lot next week about the Abiding Hope theology and ecclesiology, how we come at things, what's unique about us, and the importance of theology in organizational intelligence or strategic organizational development in the church. So we'll focus on that next time. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Okay,
week, ladies.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
God bless you.